Welcome everyone to the May installment of our webinar series, Postsecondary Pathways, hosted by the Hunt Institute. I am Dr. Waverly Wissenant, Deputy Director of Higher Education at the Hunt Institute. The Hunt Institute is a national nonprofit dedicated to supporting and advising education leaders and policymakers nationwide on education issues across the education continuum. Today's webinar will explore strategies to boost post-secondary enrollment by addressing common barriers, strengthening community partnerships, and offering practical support for students and families. We will learn about actionable tools to increase college access and to help more students benefit from higher education. Now, let me pass the mic to John Lance, our Director of Higher Education, who will be moderating today's discussion.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm excited to be a part of this webinar and to moderate it, and I appreciate Waverly and all of our panelists for joining us. I come from a background of working in college enrollment, and this is one of the questions that we always wrestled with is how do you increase post-secondary enrollment? How do you get students to think about and to go to college? And for some populations to think about it as a realistic option for them as well too. So I'm really excited about the panel that we have here today. They bring together a host of different experiences. We have three folks with us today. We have Dr. Laura Perna, who's the Vice Provost for Faculty at University Pennsylvania. And then we have Dr. Jenna Robinson, who's the president of the James G. Martin Center for Academic Renewal. And then we have Winnie Lado from EAB. And EAB is a place where I have actually a lot of friends that work at as well too. One of them set us up with Winnie to be part of this conversation. So really excited to have her here. And to get us started, Dr. Perna, I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself a little bit to our webinar folks, but then also respond to the question of what are the most common barriers preventing students, particularly from underrepresented groups, from enrolling in post-secondary education, and how can schools and communities address them effectively? Dr. Perna?
Great, thanks so much. Thanks. I'm honored to be here in this esteemed company and to be here on this important topic. So I am serving as Vice Provost for Faculty at Penn, but really, as a scholar, I've dedicated my career to trying to understand how to increase college access and success, especially for underrepresented groups. And over time, I've had the chance to look at this issue from a variety of different perspectives. In many ways, I think in the time that I've been looking at this, the topic is more important now than ever. There are many who are questioning the value of higher education, but the benefits of higher education to individual participants and to our society, our state, our nation, our states, our communities, there are just so many benefits. At the same time, the opportunity to realize those benefits is highly unequal. So college enrollment and college completion rates have generally been trending up over time. At the same time, we have persisting differences across groups in college enrollment and completion. So it's just one statistic, 58% of individuals from the highest family income quartile have attained a bachelor's degree by age 24. So 58%, compared with 16% of students from the lowest family income quartile. So 16% versus 58%. These are really, really big differences. And we are making remarkably little progress closing gaps across groups. One challenge is that there's no simple solution, right? There's not just one thing that we can do to try to make opportunity more equal. You could argue that the forces that influence college completion are the result of a process that begins as early as birth. There's so many steps and transitions that happen along the way, and different forces that serve to structure who has opportunity and who does not. As I look at what matters for college access and success, I group the barriers and the forces that matter into three categories. So students need the financial resources to pay the costs. They need the academic preparation to complete college level work, and they need the support and information to navigate their way from initial enrollment to completion. So those are the things that matter, but the availability of the required financial resources, academic preparation and support, and information is unequal. and it varies based on the characteristics of students and their families, varies based on the characteristics of K through 12 schools and higher ed institutions that people attend. And it varies based on places where people live. So there are different resources in different communities, and there are different approaches within different states. So for example, whether students have the needed financial resources to pay college costs depends on their family's personal financial situation. It depends on their state's approach to funding public higher education, and their approaches to awarding need-based grant aid. Depends on the availability of things like the Pell Grant. Depends on whether students attend a college or university with additional resources to meet 100% of students' financial need. Whether students have needed academic preparation depends on the courses that are offered in the schools they attend. It depends on the resources their families have for additional academic enrichment. It depends on the availability of bridge programs and other support services. And whether students have the needed college-related information varies based on whether their parents completed college, varies based on the number of college counselors in the school they attend. It varies based on what colleges and universities do in terms of sharing information. So as we think about the roles and responsibilities of schools and communities, policymakers, educators, in my view, our goal should be to ensure that all people have the financial resources that are required to pay, all people have the opportunity for high quality college preparation coursework and the supports they need to succeed in those courses, and the information they need about how to apply for college and financial aid and how to interpret financial aid offers. As we think about how to accomplish those goals, we also need to pay attention to the characteristics, the needs, and the strengths of the target population. And we need to adapt our approach to reflect those different characteristics. We often focus on traditional college going, so the movement of students directly from high school full-time into college, but we know there are many other ways in which students are entering higher education, and we need to be thinking about how to provide opportunity for other people who are typically not considered. So adult learners, people who are working full-time. We have to consider the characteristics of our students. So students with intersecting identities. So for example, the likelihood of completing college is lower for people who are both first-generation college students and low income than for people who are either one of those backgrounds. We need to consider people who are parents or have other caretaking responsibilities, neurodiversity, differently abled, rural communities. The list could go on and on. So lots more to talk about, but hopefully those remarks are helpful.
Dr. Perna, those remarks were super helpful. A couple things I'll just chime into related to what you said. One is I think you're noting how complex some of the challenges in increasing post-secondary enrollment can really be. And I think that's why this conversation is helpful, because it maybe tries to disentangle a little bit, at least, some of those challenges. But one of the things that you touched on was talking about how sometimes being able to go to college is something that's impacted prior to birth. The Hunt Institute, we touch on all areas of the education continuum, going from prenatal to post-secondary education. So I appreciate that acknowledgement, because we have multiple teams that are trying to tackle this issue about how do you create positive educational experiences that lead to good outcomes for our students at all levels. So really appreciated that note. I did want to mention too, we had someone post in the Q&A that you did a roundtable this morning, and they referred to you as the GOAT. So really appreciate you being here, and appreciate your comments as well too. I just wanted to share that. Dr. Robinson, I'll turn things over to you. If you can take a moment to introduce yourself a little bit, and then also respond to the question. The Martin Center advocates for improving the quality and affordability of higher education. What policies or reforms do you believe are critical to reducing barriers to college enrollment, particularly for students from low income or marginalized communities? Dr. Robinson?
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm Jenna Robinson, president of the James G. Martin Center for Academic Renewal. The Martin Center is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We propose public policy solutions to promote excellence and accountability in higher education in North Carolina and across the country. And we are especially interested in solutions in public policy that can be implemented by states, and university boards and universities themselves. So thank you for this question. I think it's a really important one. And I'm going to talk about 5 different ways or 5 different policy changes to improve affordability of higher education. And the first thing I would say is to keep the sticker price low for all students. I'm a big proponent of tuition freezes. And the reason why I think this is so important is because for some students, the sticker price is the only thing they're ever going to look at. I know, and you all know, that universities give a lot of institutional aid. They often will meet all of the needs of students who have high financial needs, but that message does not often get conveyed to students. And as soon as they see the sticker price, they just stop considering that institution. And so I think keeping those sticker prices low and affordable is really important for attracting students in the first place. We don't want students to be turned off by the sticker price. The second thing I want to promote is financial aid transparency. And by that, I mean that offers need to use plain, standardized language and clear formatting in order to be consumer friendly. Offers need to include the total cost of attendance, the types of aid students are going to be getting, the net price, and ultimately, they also need to be comparable between different institutions. I think one of the biggest problems is that because we have non-standardized letters for financial aid offers, students can't compare between the institutions to which they've applied to figure out which one is actually the best deal. It's not always clear which types of aid are loans and which type of grants. It's not always clear that a Parent Plus loan is part of the offer or is part of that financial aid letter. And so I think making financial aid offers just extremely transparent and written in plain language will go a long way to helping students understand what universities are really offering, what they will have to pay back, and what is a grant or a free gift of money. I think that there's a lot of improvement to be made in that area. The third thing I'll say is to improve transfer pathways. We all know that community colleges are an affordable way to start a post-secondary education. And it's a real opportunity for students also who maybe are not prepared yet to go into a 4-year environment. And so improving those transfer pathways, making sure that courses will transfer from the community college to the university, making sure that students know what they have to take, opening those lines of communication between the university and the community college, and providing people at the community college who can help students navigate the transfer process is extremely important. I think states should also embrace dual enrollment. They should have more high schools that offer dual enrollment classes, which give an opportunity to students who maybe can't afford 4 years of post-secondary education to get 1 year, 2 years already under their belt as part of their high school education, so that they start with a leg up when they move on to university. And the last thing I would say is that the federal government needs to improve FAFSA. I know it is going better this year than it has in the past, but I think there are still changes that should be made to make the FAFSA easy to fill out, accessible to everyone, and not an unnecessary stumbling block for students who need that opportunity in order to go on to higher education. Thank you.
Dr. Robinson, thank you for those comments. Your comments really, I think, dovetail nicely with some of the things that Dr. Perna was saying, because you're touching around how the feds need to improve FAFSA, I think that can be a barrier for some people pursuing post-secondary education, particularly for first-generation students or for students from a low-income background, which is something that Dr. Perna was speaking towards a little bit earlier. But then I really liked your comments around financial aid transparency, having a consistent language across institutions. Before coming to the Hunt Institute, I worked at a number of different institutions, and I've seen financial aid award letters at all of them, and none of them are the same. And sometimes how institutions are maybe interpreting rules related to financial aid and what they're able to award students can look vastly different. So I really appreciate your comments. And I know you've helped us out in a number of different things within North Carolina, so really appreciate you being here as well too and joining us for this conversation. Winnie, I'll turn things over to you. If you could introduce yourself a little bit, maybe talk a little bit about EAB as well, and then I think you're a part of a unit of EAB called College Greenlight. If you can talk a little bit about College Greenlight as well too, and respond to the question of, College Greenlight provides resources to students from underrepresented backgrounds and supports institutions who seek to connect to those students. What strategies have you all found most effective in helping students navigate the college application and enrollment process? And how have you seen colleges leverage these community partnerships to support these students in their journey to higher education? Winnie?
Thank you very much. And thank you, Dr. Perna and Dr. Robinson, for sharing your insights, because this is exactly the heart of the work that I do at EAB. For those of you who don't know much about EAB, EAB is a company that works with higher education institutions across the nation, but we also work in that K through 12 space. We want to make our communities stronger and education smarter. So how we do that is we help institutions isolate and identify key areas in which they need some problem solving or support. It could be student success. It could be research surrounded by DEI efforts. It could be research to help them understand the student pipeline coming in from the K through 12 space. So there's a lot of ways that we all collectively are tapping into education. And for me, I work on the higher ed side, but specifically in enrollment. Our institutions can't exist without students. So how do the students get to the institutions? And that's where College Greenlight comes into play. We are a smaller organization within the company that works directly with college partners who are interested in identifying information and opportunity gaps that exist amongst historically underrepresented students. With College Greenlight, when we talk about underrepresented students, we have to use a broad term because it's always me asking institutions, who really is underrepresented on your campus? We have to ask these institutions to name the underrepresentation so that we can understand that these students might have different approaches to how they understand the college access process. And so as part of College Greenlight, not only do we work with our college partners, we spend a lot of time really engaging in the college counseling space. Lots of our college counselors are part of community-based organizations. Our community-based organizations aren't just the organizations that are working to help families financially or might be able to help families in your local community with healthcare. These specific community-based organizations that we work with are working with students who are college bound. So think about the TRIO programs across the nation. Think about Jack Kent Cooke Foundation. Think about Chicago Scholars. All of these programs are part of the Greenlight community in the network. And so when we have our college partners, they often come to us and say, it's really challenging for us to find who is underrepresented on our campus. Once they've identified who's underrepresented on their campus, I work with them to implement strategies to help them recognize who these students are, but then to understand their trends of college-going behavior. A lot of underrepresented students go misunderstood in this process. And so when we work with our partners, it's breaking down the assumptions that we uniformly make about these underrepresented students. And so I also spend a lot of time hosting bias trainings for enrollment teams across the nation, because when they're reading applications and reviewing students, there is bias there inherently, good or bad. And so what barriers are we creating as the professionals to prohibit students from possibly seeing the potential on college campuses? What are opportunities that we can help illuminate for our institutions to better subject students to a successful approach on their college campus? Students are changing, ever changing. And so our role is to really help to translate what's happening in the student experience and also to translate what the counselors are experiencing with their students. I always tell my college partners, a lot of the counselors who work directly with these students not only work with these students to help them with college success or the conversation about going to college or post-secondary education, they're also talking with these students about their lived experiences. They might be the ones helping, their families or those who are their advocates. And so we have to also help those institutions hone into those communities to make sure that those communities can feel that the institutions are trusted partners. The institutions can make sure that students are successful. And so to answer your question, how have I seen institutions institutions do this, a lot of institutions are really tapped into building partnerships and early awareness with students in middle school and students who are freshmen and sophomore in high school, because the conversation about college shouldn't just start in your junior and senior year. And so for those individuals who lack the access to have those conversations, how are institutions tapping into them first? If you think about summer programs, it might be happening on your college campus, but are you bringing your enrollment team in front of those students to talk about your institution or the possibility of going to college? Or I've seen more institutions embrace talking about the complexity of certain degrees. A lot of time, institutions love to be flashy about students becoming doctors, but what if a student just wants to become a librarian? So helping our institutions really meet the students where they're at so that they can also feel empowered to say, I can grow and I can develop on your campus. So we've seen a lot of different ways for our institutions to tap in that way. But we've also seen our institutions tap into themselves, tap into the professionals so that they have a better understanding of how to connect with the communities when they go and travel and visit those communities or those high schools or those community-based organizations. And when we think about the counselors, what we do is provide them resources like fly-in programs across the nation, and programs don't cost anything for students. And so we want to share that information. Or we'll put blogs out there about, schools that meet 100% of demonstrated need. I think Dr. Perna and Dr. Robinson really highlighted something, that any conversation about affordability is always going to persist amongst these students. And so we need to decode what affordability means. We need to decode the way that we can help students feel powerful. And so a lot of the work that I do is really strategizing with institutions to step into a little bit more depth in the way that they interact with these students. The last thing that I will say is that oftentimes when we talk about underrepresented students, we talk about them monolithically. And so it is really, really hard for us to separate ourselves from the idea that each student can be multifaceted. And I tell people all the time, I grew up in the United States, but I wasn't born in the United States. I was a refugee. Then I found out I was first generation to college once I entered college. So growing up in the United States, having that conversation of being labeled first generation to college was not something that I experienced in my childhood. And there are many, many, many college students today who are unaware of that status. And so when we're throwing out names and statuses out there, how are we empowering the students to also see that that's a positive benefit to them, or helping institutions to recognize when you are siloing those students, are you doing that to help them be successful, or are you doing that to just check off the box that you are, doing equity or access work? So those are a few things, and I will end it there.
No, I love that. And I want to touch on a couple of things that you said, because as you were talking, it reminded me something that a mentor said to me once, that every student has a story, and your job as an administrator on a college campus, and I think particularly for enrollment management folks or missions counselors, those folks, you really need to connect with those individual stories, and they're all different. Now, I think institutions sometimes try to paint broad strokes and broad umbrellas because it's easier to report out some of those metrics and those figures. But I like, because what you're speaking to is really this need to connect with communities. And I think in that, connect with individuals as well too, and take time to learn their stories, learn what sort of things that they need to be able to move forward and to seek out college enrollment. So I really loved that stuff. And I love that there's an organization, a for-profit organization, a company that is helping institutions do these types of things and really think critically about how they're encouraging and engaging and connecting with communities. So really excited to hear from that. I want to take a step back just a little bit and just remind folks in the audience that you can submit questions via our Q&A feature. It should be at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Feel free to drop in those questions. I have a whole team behind me that is gathering those questions, and then will feed them to me so that I can ask them of our panelists. So please go ahead and drop those questions in there as you have them, so that we can get to them. I want to ask each of you, before we open it up to our general questions, a question. What role do community partnerships play in increasing college enrollment rates? How can educators, school counselors, and community leaders collaborate more effectively to ensure that students have the necessary resources and guidance to pursue higher education? Dr. Perna, I'll start with you.
Great, thanks. I'm going to start by building on something that I heard from what Winnie said. And this is something that I'm trying to do in my work. Some of my work is really, we need to look critically at our prevailing practices from the perspectives of current students, right? It's clear as we look at, outcomes for different groups, what we're doing right now is not sufficient, right? We're missing people. Too many students aren't getting what they need. And so looking at it from the perspective of students is really, really important. One example of a project that I did is related to things that Jenna talked about. So we looked at net price calculators, and one of the challenges for students and their families is it's really hard to have early information about whether you can afford college, right? So interpreting the financial aid offers that you get is a struggle, and there's a lot of issue there. To get a financial aid offer, you have had to complete a number of steps already, right? You have to apply for admission, you have to get admitted, you have to complete the FAFSA, you have to get the financial aid offer letter. But we don't have one of the problems in our system is that it's really hard for people to know how much it will cost early on. And so I've really been thinking about partnerships and the ways that we can be better at communicating that information around college affordability early in the process. Because hypothetically, if you have early information that you actually can afford to go to college, that can change your behavior, right? You could take different courses in high school, you can make plans earlier. And so one type of partnership that I'm looking at is the College Promise Program. And so working on a report that will be out soon looking at programs in the 12 Midwestern states. And there are different types of programs that we're featuring. So there are programs that are sponsored by state governments. One example would be the Tennessee Promise, free tuition to attend a community college. There are programs that are sponsored by institutions. So Temple has a Temple Promise for students with family incomes below a certain level. And then there are community-based promise programs, and they're really focused on people who attend particular K through 12 schools and typically partnered with a community college or other four-year institution. And so I think one of the advantages of these programs is if they're well structured, they provide clear early information that if you meet these eligibility criteria, at least some of your costs will be covered. And so there's that part of it. And so I think that's a mechanism for us to think about that college affordability issue. One of the areas for partnership that I think we need to really be looking at is the FAFSA completion. And Jenna talked about this. I'm really worried with the cuts in the Department of Education that the challenges we know students and families have had in the past with the FAFSA will only be bigger as we have fewer Department of Ed staff to help people and institutions through this process. So there are areas of partnership around financial aid that I think are really important. There's so many other types of partnerships too that I think are important. No one institution, K through 12 schools, many colleges and universities, we can't do it on our own, right? We have to connect with people in particular places to make sure that people are getting the services that they need. And there are a whole host of other partnerships out there that I think are good models. But in the interest of time, I think I'll stop here.
No, I appreciated that. And then Dr. Robinson, I'll turn things over to you, and then we'll go to Winnie to answer that question.
I was muted. All right. I think community partnerships are extremely important in getting students to enroll in post-secondary education. And I want to expand this just beyond just college enrollment, but to all types of post-secondary enrollment, because I think that the first thing that community partnerships can do is to educate students on all of the options that are out there. I think there is a certain number of students who are not interested in college, and therefore they think they're not interested in any kind of post-secondary education. And I think that community partners should let them know that college is not your only option for post-secondary education. There are other opportunities out there. Apprenticeships are I think one of the ones we need to focus on more. I think a lot of people are interested in a more hands-on, get to the workforce fast kind of education, and apprenticeships allow them to do that. I think that there's also, the military is an option. There's on-site business training where you go directly to a company and learn there where they do your post-secondary education as an employee, slightly different from an official apprenticeship. But I think educating about all of those options means that more students will choose some kind of post-secondary education instead of assuming I'm not interested in college and therefore no education is available to me. And I think that kind of education needs to occur early, as Winnie said earlier. You can't wait until students are juniors and seniors. You need to start educating them about their opportunities early, so that they can make that decision about either dual enrollment, or figuring out what the prerequisites are going to be, figuring out what their pathway is going to look like. The second thing that I think community organizations can do is to uncomplicate things, because I think this is another real barrier for students, is that looking at all these options, looking even just at all the different colleges that are available, is an unbelievably complicated process. Filling out the application for federal student aid, doing everything in the right order, meeting the admissions deadlines. All of those things are individual barriers to eventually getting to some kind of post-secondary education. And so I think that having a partner who can uncomplicate that, whether it is a guidance counselor, whether it's an organization that comes in and works with individual students, whether it's a mentor or a tutor, uncomplicating the process, I think, is essential. And then lastly, I think that we need to remember that among the community partnerships is the business community. I think the business community often gets ignored. And I think that they're a really important partner. The business community, that's where students will end up once they leave higher education and enter the workforce. The business community is ultimately a recipient of all of this human capital that higher education is developing. And I think businesses should be more a part of the process. They are to some extent, by offering co-ops, by offering apprenticeships, by offering other kinds of education. But I think that all kinds of institutions should be more open to partnering with the business community early on, to communicate those needs, about what the workforce needs are, what the opportunities are for students post-graduation, and really just get them invested in more post-secondary pathways, and making it easier for students to end up eventually in those business roles.
No, I love that. Thank you. Winnie, turn things over to you. Go for it.
Sure. Thank you so much to Laura and Jennifer for sharing your insights, because you are 100% correct. We need to do so much more to ensure that students find a successful experience when they think about education. But sometimes I just tell students, education is a tool, and you have to know how to use it. Whether or not you use it today or tomorrow or 10 years down the road, it's there for you. It's something that you put in your toolbox. And so I think institutions need to take more time investing in community partnerships, because they are crucial to understanding students. Students thrive off of communities. Why? They go to school, it's a school community. They have where they live, that's also a community. So they're familiar with their community. And their community also recognizes the resources or lack of resources that they might have. And so the more that we engage with the community, it allows for institutions to also diminish the fear associated with going to college. Because when you come in and you're like, hey, I'm going to tell you about college, you have to remember that these students are young. They are still trying to develop a sense of who do they want to become. And if we come in and throw the agenda of, hey, I want you to enroll at my institution, it's scary for the students. So how do you empower them to see education as a tool, a resource that they can utilize always in their lifetime, and help them to see that sense of energy in the way that they approach education? And that's going to help. And I also think investing in community partnerships allows for us to not worry about reinventing the wheel. Because a lot of us are like, we got to do something better. We got to do something new. But if we take this time to really engage in the community partnerships that are already doing this work, we can expand that. So I think it's so crucial to engage with community partners.
No, I love that. Thank you all for those comments. I mean, I think we're echoing on very similar things, but I like kind of how we're coming at it from bunch of different angles, and it really kind of, I think, speaks to the message that we all have to work together to make things happen. So I really love that. We're going to open things up to Q&A now. So for folks who are listening, feel free again to use that Q&A feature. To ask questions. You can ask questions anonymously, or you can tie your name to it, whatever you feel comfortable with. We'll take questions either way. We do have one question that I want to ask of you all, and feel free, whichever one of you all wants to chime in first, go ahead. But the question is, more than ever, we are now in an environment that is de-emphasizing the need for higher education. States have emphasized the plans to remove degrees in hiring employees. We know college is still important. How can we combat this growing messaging? Anyone of y'all can take a stab first. Jenna, I saw you.
Yeah, I've been a proponent of the state plans to remove degrees in hiring employees in certain roles. And so I think I'll take this on. And the reason I've been a proponent of these plans is because often the degree becomes a barrier for those students who have a lot of experience and are unable to get a promotion because it's officially required that you have a certain degree. And so I think that where removing degrees in state jobs, for example, really makes a difference is you have career state employees who have worked in, say, a particular state office their entire lives. They have amazing experience. They have all of the tools that they need to do the next level job. But the official rules say that in order to be promoted to that job, you have to have a bachelor's degree. And it's a barrier for those employees. At the same time, I think that, you're right, that there has been a de-emphasis on the need for higher education. I think a lot of that has been around people wondering, what is the return on investment for higher education? And so I think that what needs to be done is to reemphasize the facts about the ROI for higher education. And that is that most students who go to college and graduate from college on time will have a positive ROI. And then for universities, frankly, to work on, the barriers to having a positive ROI, which is long time to degree, admitting students who then are unable to graduate for whatever reason. And really addressing those problems head on so that when people do hear about, I'm not sure if there's a good ROI, that colleges have the facts to back up that say, like, we have data for our school, and we are working to close the gaps for graduation rates, for time to degree. We're making sure that people who come in are able to get out and able to pay their debt back.
Yeah, I think that's all right. I think we need to do a better job in all those things and a few others, right? I think we have to be clear about communicating how much it actually costs to the places that people actually go to. There's the communication about how much college costs in the media, I feel isn't representative of how much most students actually pay, right? So we have to be better about how much it actually costs and the mechanisms available to pay cost. And higher ed has to do better in making sure that people who enroll actually can finish in a timely manner and make that transition into the labor market and get the earnings that come. I also am I think we need to do a better job too of communicating the multiple types of value of higher education. So I get the increasing attention now to ROI, but college also has other types of benefits that are important to people and to the world, right? Even if we think about the value of higher ed and AI, right? We know with previous technology, it's been people who have more education who end up doing better, right? You have the other types of skills that are able to take advantage of that changing technology. There's also preparation of liberal arts for life that we're not really good about talking about. And so I think we need to do a better job of communicating and communicating and demonstrating and actually delivering on the real value that we have.
Winnie, any comments you might add?
Sure. What I will add is just simply recognizing that a lot of students who think about post-secondary education see it from a deficit model. Why? Because there's so much exposure to social media and the internet. One thing that we do with College Greenlight and Appley, which is our website, one-stop shop for students, is we talk about the students' ability to translate how they show up. If you go to Google right now and you just type in college makes me feel, you will really see a lot of students say, not smart enough, not prepared, like a failure. So students of today don't even see that there's any excitement associated with going to college, like Dr. Perna and Dr. Robinson said. And so how can we demonstrate that building your skill sets is also part of that educational journey? Students are so used to instant gratification. So if you have an institution, right, and it's like, hey, you got to be here for 4 years, students know that they can go to a 2-year and complete their degree in 2 years' time and then directly go into the workforce. So how are we communicating the value of education in a sense of longevity or short term? And if we aren't communicating that there's efficacy in both ways, then it's going to make students really fall into the non-consumption space where they're like, you know what, I'm just going to go straight into work. I don't have to, go get a degree. So it's part of the responsibility is the adults in the room helping students to reclaim that education is valuable to them and it can be useful, but not tied down to some of the systems that we have in place that are natural barriers for students.
First, I loved all of those comments. One thing that makes me think of too is the importance of wraparound services for students in post-secondary spaces. I think that's really critical for students to really get done in a quick amount of time. But then also too, it reminds me of some of the work that our K through 12 team has done, where they're highlighting a number of different things. But one that maybe resonates to this conversation is I think our K through 12 system needs to help students be excited about learning, because when students are excited about learning and they're curious and we foster that curiosity, we're going to make the post-secondary realm much more attractive to them because they're seeing the opportunity to learn something more or expand the things that they're able to learn about. And I think that has a huge value. I want to roll to our next few questions. We have a question that says, historically, guidance counseling regarding post-secondary opportunities has been fraught with discrimination and discouragement for students of color by some counselors. How can we overcome this problem? Any one of you feel free to chime in.
I can go first on this one. So counseling, we know counseling matters. We know students need individualized, personalized information in order to think through and understand what their options are post-secondary, in terms of post-secondary options, and then how to get there. The availability of counseling in many schools is just, there are too few people to do all that needs to be done by the typical counselor in the school, right? So that I think is a real problem. And so then, assuming that we're not magically going to have more money for more counselors in schools, we have to think about how can we better ensure that those information needs are met. So there are different models of partnerships that can help with this, right? The College Advising Corps is an initiative that takes recent college graduates and links them to high schools in underserved areas. And really, those are folks who are dedicated to college counseling, right? So that's a way to help focus on that. There are different college access related organizations that focus on providing information and support, some with scholarships, like the Lenfest Scholars Foundation in Pennsylvania helps provide that support to students in rural Pennsylvania high schools who apply and are selected. There are a whole host of different college access organizations that can help supplement and partner with schools in a way to provide students with information. The question gets at a really important point. We have to continue to look at who's getting access to what types of information and make sure that all students are getting what they need and it's not biased in the way that the question suggests. And I think we need to think about what are the ways that we can really help schools that have a lot of other demands on them, make sure that they're providing the counseling students need around college.
I would love to quickly add, like Dr. Perner said, there is just not enough counselors, right? So some of our counselors who are out there in schools are spending a lot of time just trying to do duties as assigned in addition to counseling students. And so what we need to realize is that when we are helping counselors, not only does the community need to play a role, but it's counselors investing in being able to connect with professional development opportunities. For example, Appley, we have an Appley Counselor Advisory Board. We have 12 counselors from across the nation who work at public schools, private schools, from schools that majority of the students are first gen to college. And what we're able to do is then hear from them and see where they have their challenges and then directly apply and create resources for counselors across the nation. And so sometimes it's all about helping counselors be able to share their narratives and express to different entities across the nation, whether it's NCAN or Appley.com, to say that we do not have access to these resources. Is this something that you can help create that allows for many of us to also have access to those resources? So tapping into some of that also helps for counselors. Like I mentioned earlier, but counselors engaging in some kind of bias training. I know when I gave the bias training counselors a few weeks ago, it was revolutionary for them because they didn't realize how much they hold within themselves that prohibits students from being successful. And so sometimes it's just a reminder of, hey, we're working with individuals and sometimes it's just a job. But when we want to do our work effectively, we have to ensure that we understand our communities and that we tap into making sure that we know what we're doing justly to justify and advocate for them.
I would just add that, when I was in high school, getting post-secondary counseling or getting counseling about post-secondary pathways was an opt-in. And because it was an opt-in, the students who were already really interested in going to college were the ones who were taking up all the time. And so I think changing the model so it's not an opt-in, so that it's an automatic, everybody gets post-secondary counseling, would go a long way to making sure that everybody has at least an opportunity to talk with a counselor about those post-secondary pathways. Of course, that does nothing to solve and probably actually exacerbates the problem of not enough counselors. But I think, putting the onus on the counselors to reach out to every student is important.
I actually really like that. And you talking about your high school experience, Dr. Robertson, made me think of mine. It wasn't opt out, but I was one of those high school students that just kind of squeezed through all the cracks and ended up not meeting with my college counselor, and yet here I am today. So I think things worked out, but it does. Some of what you all were touching on too just reminds me like communities should be thinking about how can we support our college counselors and maybe even how can we get students thinking about post-secondary options, all of the options. And I think you all were talking about some of them, some apprenticeships, community colleges, military, colleges, universities, those types of options. How can we get them thinking about it even younger and earlier? I think of my kids, my spouse is doing a career day for my kids where they're talking about what is the pathway you need to get to this career and what do those options look like for you? And that's geared towards kindergarten through fifth grade. So I think that's maybe even a good place to start to have some of these conversations. I want to jump to another question that we have from our audience. And this may be our last question. They said, thank you for sharing your thoughts today. I work in youth services in a library system that serves rural, suburban, and urban communities. What is one thing you would ask libraries who can't give patrons advice/guidance for legal reasons to do to support this work? Feel free to jump in, any one of you.
Woo! This is a question for sure. What I would say initially is that I think it's really important to be attentive to who comes to the library. Is it about providing events and opportunities that celebrate all different kinds of people and all different types of experience so they naturally feel welcome to the library? If that's the case, then that can help you build upon providing additional resources for individuals that tap into that legal space. If your library community isn't one that has created a space of welcome through the books that are shared, the organization, events that happen, it might be challenging for that to really take place. So really think about your community and how welcoming that community is to the different experiences, and tap into some of those resources that could help and say, hey, are you actually willing to come to our libraries and have conversations? And find ways to advertise this information without it becoming something controversial. But if you have that community that trusts in you, then you'll be able to bring them together.
Yeah. I don't know how strict those laws are about not giving advice. So I don't know if I can give great recommendations here. But I'm guessing that a lot of the youth who come to the library are there and using the computers and possibly just relying on Google to answer their questions about post-secondary opportunities. And if you're legally allowed to do so, giving them links to resources that can give them real advice might be a really good service for students, telling them about or just bookmarking. Here are all the bookmarks of places you can go to look for reliable post-secondary advice.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that information is not the problem, right? There's lots of information out there. There are challenges related to filtering through what's useful information and how to connect people to information that they need at the time that they need it. And so I think the library actually could provide a really important role in helping to uplift some reliable sources, right? So we know that there are resources like that the College Board offers, to help you think through how to identify colleges that might be good choices for you. And I'm sure that you, as Jenna's suggesting, you could come up with a list like that. I also wonder about the possibility of having the library be a place to bring together members of the community, right? So as you're trying to think about how to do some of the other things that have been mentioned here about connecting students to understand, what type of education is needed for what types of jobs, right? Can you bring, and how do you get internships in particular areas? Is there a way to use the library as a community focal point for different types of information sharing that brings different members of the community together?
I really love these answers. When I saw the question pop up, I was like, oh, this is a very unique question. But I wanted to ask it because it reminds me of the valuable role that I think libraries play in all communities within our country is they can be the conduits of information and of communication and a place where people can come together and get free Wi-Fi. I always tell people if you're looking for internet because you don't have the resources to have internet, you can always get it at your library, and you can always get it at McDonald's as well too. Like those are the two places that I think universally provide free Wi-Fi across the board for folks. But libraries, I think in particular, can be a place where you can start with kind of here's your starting point. And I think of a library that was in Illinois when I lived in Illinois, where for different kind of topical areas, they had little flyers and one pagers of here's a place to start, and here's where you can move along this continuum as you uncover and answer some more questions. And then here's where you go to get additional support from librarians to help move in different directions and to be aware of different resources that might exist. And they were linking you to different resources, similar to some of the resources we've linked here in our chat that I think can be very helpful to people. So I really appreciate those thoughts and questions.
I wanted to
to
quickly add that if any of you work with students on appley.com, we do actually have a specific section for undocumented and DACA students with a lot of information there. So any of you who are part of libraries that want to utilize a resource that has that type of information, go to appley.com, and it's free for all counselors and students to use. So definitely utilize those types of resources.
Thank you, Winnie. And we did link appley.com in the chat for folks. So everyone should be able to see it there. It does have a lot of great resources. We are coming to the close of our webinar. This has been a wonderful conversation. I'm glad that we had a touch point with all of you. Dr. Perna, Dr. Robinson, Winnie, it was a pleasure interacting with you all. I hope to have you again on some of our other work. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Waverly. But first, I want to thank some people in the background that you don't see. Megan from our policy team and Lee from our policy team. They've been providing some of the back-end support to respond to questions that we didn't get to, and then also created the session guide and flow for this session of our webinar today. And then Julie from our comms team, and then our closed captioner has been doing all of the closed captioning for this. Appreciate them being a part of it. So Waverly, I will turn things over to you. Thanks.
And thanks to John as well and our wonderful panelists. I wish we could keep this conversation going, but we are right at time. So again, thank you for all of our attendees also joining us today and engaging in this informative conversation and discussion. Before closing today, I'd be remiss to not remind everyone that the Hutton Institute does have upcoming webinars. I'm going to go ahead and share that in our chat for you all to keep us on your calendars in the coming months. And we look forward to seeing you in our webinars. Thank you all again for joining us today, and we hope to see you again soon. Bye, everybody.